promises, and they don't feel oh so wasted on himself as Sam Bennett and a couple more Panthers get their days with the cup. And what should we make out of the Edmonton Oilers' locker room video post Game 7? We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, August 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez in the Hockey News, and you follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix, and 3 times a week during the offseason. You could subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here for another edition of the show to once again celebrate the Summer of Champions here, as once again, the Florida Panthers celebration for their Stanley Cup championship continues into the summer, which right now we are 49 days away from opening night. We are more past the halfway point from the time of Game 7 completing and to the time of opening night. So Panther fans, we are more than halfway there, thankfully, as hockey is closer to being back. So a little bit of this first segment is going to discuss more about the days with the cup, Sam Bennett and multiple guys. As we discussed at the very, very top of the show, we are going to discuss what my personal reaction to the Edmonton Oilers' locker room video post Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. And we had a trade in the division today with Patrik Laine going to the Montreal Canadiens. We are going to discuss that in the third segment of the show. But first of all, Jonah Gadjovich was the first of the next wave of guys to get their days with the cup, as the cup went from New England and made it back to Ontario. As if you were keeping up with the traveling of the cup, started off in the Midwest to Manitoba, to Saskatchewan, to Europe, New England, and now it's back in Ontario. So Jonah Gadjovich gets his day with the cup in Welland, Ontario. There was a picture of him doing a bench press with the cup, and then he had a visit to the children's summer camp at New Hope Church in his hometown of Welland. But the big story that was really spoken about even before this celebration with the cup was Sam Bennett, where he got to take the cup to East Gwillimbury, Ontario, to celebrate his day. Wore a Team Canada jersey as he was welcomed with a whole group of people to celebrate him winning the Stanley Cup at East Gwillimbury Sports Complex, where he played hockey there and even scored his first goal there too. So a big celebration there, and took the cup to the South Lake Regional Health Center there to take pictures with the kids who want to get their chance to see the Stanley Cup in person. And also just the stories of the guys also taking it to people who are underprivileged people too, who might not get a chance also to play hockey on the professional level, or even at the higher level, AAA and junior hockey. So also a great chance for players over the summer that we've seen. Another example of earlier this summer was Steven Lawrence when he got his day with the cup. But going back to Sam Bennett, the big highlight that we were all just waiting for when it came to his day with the cup was all the talk about what he was going to do with his father, of eating Captain Crunch from the Stanley Cup. If you are watching this on the YouTube, you will see the tweet from Phil Pritchard at Keeper of the Cup on there, and you see the Captain Crunch in the background right on the porch, and then you see the cereal inside the cup as if it were an actual cereal bowl. And also the actual official Twitter account of Captain Crunch also quote tweeted that, talking about the Stanley Cup and it being there. But also something that Roy Bellamy of the Hockey Show brought up is if you're gonna have some Captain Crunch in the Stanley Cup, you got to do crunch berries, man. I got to agree with Roy Bellamy there. That's the best type of Captain Crunch. But also Sam Bennett also wanted to reflect that on the old throwback photo that he posted of himself, of him as a kid eating it. So he actually has an actual picture there of him with impersonating if he were ever to win the Stanley Cup, which thankfully the dreams did come true for him, and he kept his promise there. Aaron Ekblad also got a day with the cup as he brought it to his home in Bell River, Ontario. Started at the Atlas 2 Recreation Center there, where his mother Lisa also got to spoke about how much they were traveling from Bell River to Barrie later on in his teenage years to watch him play after he left at 15 years old. And Lisa also spoke about how there was some criticism on how much they were traveling for Aaron Ekblad and playing hockey. And Lisa also spoke about not begrudging her loved ones even once when it came to all that travel from the western side of Ontario all the way to Barrie. And also Dave Ekblad, which we've seen him interviewed multiple times during the father's trip during every year when the Panthers conduct it. We've heard him speak before, and even his father spoke about how he teared up knowing about how much Aaron has been through with the losing and the injuries, and even thinking about a day like this could have might have been impossible. And even at the Atlas 2 Recreational Center, the 12-year-old boy by the name of Owen Sutton appeared with Ekblad's old AAA hockey jersey of the Sun County Panthers, old logo of the vintage logo there where Ekblad played, and then getting drafted by the Florida Panthers after playing junior hockey. It just feels like that it was just a match made in heaven for him being drafted, obviously in highly that highly anticipated draft now, where the Florida Panthers got 3 out of the top 4 picks there, eventually winning the Stanley Cup. And even in the afternoon after everything was done and he had that intimate moment with his family after the fact, Sam Bennett also appeared at Ekblad's party where they also shared some chugging from the Stanley Cup as well. So great family reception that he has. And Ekblad also posted a photo on his Instagram of him and his wife Diana of their day with the cup there. So also once again, congratulations to Aaron Ekblad on once again getting his day with the cup. But in other news, in relation to the Florida Panthers, Matthew Tkachuk had quite a day. He already had his day with the cup when he took it around the city of St. Louis just a few weeks ago. But he was back in St. Louis on Sunday afternoon with him along with Boston Celtics guard Jason Tatum to throw out the first pitch of the game between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Los Angeles Dodgers, and also getting a chance to reunite there and also uplift the community and talk about beliefs of young kids who when they were young thinking that hopefully one day they could achieve greatness and winning, and how both of them winning in the same year, coming back, throwing the first pitch, about how much of an inspiration that could be to the future generations there too. But also another screenshot that I want to share too is that old photo of Matthew Tkachuk and Jason Tatum in the bus. Obviously, there's that video of Jason Tatum saying why he went to Chaminade High School, and then at the end of it saying "great guys." So, but there's also that other photo of them inside the bus where Jason Tatum looks a little maybe squeamish there based on the photo, or maybe he doesn't look prepared. But also, they brought back the guy in the background of the photo. He goes by the name of Jacob, and one of the classmates, and also in that he attended that St. Louis Cardinals game the other day, where he got to recreate that photo. If you're watching this on the YouTube, you are seeing it being that photo being created once again, and with Jacob alongside them in the background and just so much smiles. Obviously, also something to mention that Matthew Tkachuk brought the Stanley Cup belt that he had from the celebration along with the parade, and Jason Tatum having the Larry O'Brien trophy there. And also, speaking of Matthew Tkachuk, Monday night from Amerant Bank Arena was WWE Monday Night Raw from the arena, as you can see in that we have our background green screen here, and also Pat McAfee, a guy who has brought Matthew Tkachuk multiple times on the show, brought Bill Zito on too. Big fan of hockey, period. He was also at WWE Monday Night Raw, and the Panthers gave him a Matthew Tkachuk jersey for him to sport prior to the event, and also a "Let's Go Panthers" chant broke out that I saw on Twitter on Monday night from the event. So also great to see that even in a non-hockey event going on at Emirates Bank Arena, that still the buzz is alive and well uh, for the Panthers and their celebration for winning the Stanley Cup. But we're going to switch gears, and in the next segment, we are going to discuss the post locker room video from the Edmonton Oilers that surfaced a few weeks ago, and we are going to discuss. I'm going to discuss my reaction to it and talk about the journey of and being on the opposite end of things from that. We are going to discuss that more next here on Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're to speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. And you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And for eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insights on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So this is a topic that I only really brought up for maybe 20-30 seconds last week when we did our crossover with Adam Danker, now the former host of Locked On Lightning. And I wanted to really have an extended conversation on this. If you are not familiar with the video, Oilers on their website have this thing called Oilers Plus, where it's like behind the scene access stuff, but also some fans decided to clip some video from it and actually post it as little videos on X, and also gave us a little bit of an idea what the locker room for the Oilers was like after Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. And some of you are probably thinking, why am I bringing this up in the first place too? But before I get there, the video of the Oilers in the locker room was all the guys just going to the locker room, silent as can be. And then you hear in the background the presentation of the Stanley Cup. You just hear Andrew Imber, the PA announcer of the Panthers, hear the Stanley Cup. However, I can't impersonate his voice, as obviously I can't do it as well as he does. Obviously, it's his own voice, but that's neither here nor there. But the fact that they could hear it from there, along with losing, along with the silence too. And then it took a while until Zach Hyman decided to say something with falling short and everything too. And it just gives me that feeling once again. Obviously, we talk about the joys of victory, the agonies of defeat. This is something that we sign up for as fans. And it just brings me back to 2023, the end of that, what many called it a Cinderella run at the time. But I mean, just that 3-year period of President's Trophy, Stanley Cup final, and then winning it. But then in the in between for the Panthers, the growing pains of a new coaching staff, new identity with Matthew Tkachuk, and then the playing playoff hockey since January there, and then having, let's say the speed limit is 70, but you have to reach a certain destination. And if you don't make it at a certain time to, like, let's say your job, you're fired. So you're going all gas, no brakes, 90 miles an hour, maybe even even at the point where they define as reckless driving, which I believe the definition of reckless driving is 30 over, but as the actual definition there. But for the Panthers, I mean, just going through that journey, just the last year and then falling short. I mean, that is what that video reminds me of. I know there were Panther fans picking on the Oilers. Oh, suck it up. Oh, you guys are losers. Yada yada yada. But that's not the direction that I want to go in. I just think about how sometimes just teams don't recover from things like that too. And again, once if the Panthers ended up blowing that 3-0 lead and ended up it happening again where they lost in the final, but this time in a different fashion, where the expectation was to win it, especially how great the Panthers ended the regular season with 4 straight home wins to clinch the Atlantic Division title. And it's crazy because once again, Matthew Tkachuk brought up some teams get to lose 3 straight and they go home. And for the Panthers, even before Game 7, Matthew Tkachuk said, "We still have a chance after all that." So, but also even before with the injuries, how battered and bruised they were, and the first 16 games without Montour and Ekblad, OEL and Forsling having to gel together on the top pair, which that ended up paying off so much as OEL was the power play quarterback in the last 3 games of the Stanley Cup final. And those first 16 games where you bring in that veteran to lead the charge on the defense for the Panthers there, was truly such a I think it'll forever be such an underrated move by Bill Zito. Same thing with Anthony Stolarz, which the health of the goaltending department, not having to call up Spencer Knight once throughout last season, is just it just did so many wonders for the Panthers and just the ripple effects of the team and just roster movement for the Cats too. And not having any major injuries. Yeah, at times you had Barkov miss a little time, especially in January, where he only missed a little bit of time, but was a little battered and bruised after an elbow from Alec Martinez and didn't miss time. But even before in November, where he was going through his fair share of sickness too, and Anton Lundell having to step up, and the experience that Anton Lundell brought from the playoffs before and carrying it over to the next season, because let's not forget he had a sophomore slump and then showed up and came alive in that 2023 postseason, especially in round 2 against the Maple Leafs. And even how the Panthers were able to get through certain ruts too without Game 7 of round 1 in 2023. None of this happens for the Panthers. The confidence, the pain of getting all the way to the finish line, but just falling short. And it helped even manage just different, once again, different ruts of, especially mid-March, where that Dallas game, March 12th, I remember, Panthers won, but they played horribly after. And then after that, they win 2 out of their next 10 too. Even before that, I remember Dan Rosen from NHL.com asking Paul Maurice, saying, is the worst part about playing this well is the fact that it's early March? And I just remember him asking that question to Paul Maurice too. And maybe thinking at the time where maybe the Panthers peaked at that point too early. But obviously, something that we learned throughout the postseason is not every game is the same. Momentum doesn't really truly carry from one game to the next there. But But here they are as Stanley Cup champions, and just that interview once again with Jackie Redmond of everything, of all the injuries, and just the consistency of winning, saying how much they love each other. But even the year before when they lost, about how much the group loves each other too. And that's something that you could take away from the Edmonton locker room too, from their defeat, as a reminder of the Panthers on when they of how heartbroken we were as fans, of some of us only experiencing it for the first time because of how long it'd been from 2023 and 1996, and to do it 2 years in a row, this is uncharted territory, obviously, for the Panthers. And this is also, I want to say this as don't take this for granted too, of what this means, and what bouncing back also means, and how not many teams get a chance to do it too. And McDavid got a lot of criticism for not coming out to accept the Conn Smythe. Especially, I remember Bill Lindsay's talking about it, that he should have, for the game of hockey, to respect the game. And honestly, after watching that video and seeing how mad he was, obviously, just like Barkov, he is a type of leader who is more of who does it on the ice and is the example. Except McDavid has more of an RBF. That I'm going to say it like that, because this is a family-friendly show. But I am with McDavid of not coming out and taking this Conn Smythe. And it's a damn if you do, damn if you don't, on him being the first one to speak up. He got a lot of criticism also for not being the first one to speak up, and Zach Hyman being the one to do it. But for McDavid, just the silence there and knowing when to and when to not say something too, I think that is leadership all in itself too. And there's a part of me, there is a part of me that wants, if there is a video out there of the Panthers locker room after game 5, after June 13th, 2023, losing by a score of 9-3, where Mark Stone got a hat trick. I want to see, part of me wants to see that video, if there is one out there, because I just want to see of how much fire there, how much hurt there was, so to see what truly lit the fire for that summer. Because it's been, once again, it's been 57 days since the Panthers won the cup. The like I said, June 13th, 2023, 11 days prior to the year to 2024, with the cup final ending. So around this time last year, the Panthers had 11 more days to think about the Stanley Cup, of losing it. And and obviously, for the Oilers side of things, this is a long summer for them. And for the Panthers, obviously, they're on this side. They are enjoying the victory, but you can only imagine, just when the cameras are off for these guys, just about the putting your head down and getting to work, and just the focus, and just one thing, one goal only, is to win that Stanley Cup. And that is something that we could take away from that video that surfaced of the Edmonton Oilers post locker room video there. But thankfully for the Panthers, they are there as champions, and for the Oilers, they have a lot to think about too, and also a lot of roster moves there, as the offer sheets for Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway are still pending to see what they do. They got rid of Ceci. They could still find a way to get Evander Kane back into the lineup after a stint on LTIR, if they match one of them too. So there's still a lot of work for new GM Stan Bowman to do, as they are trying to get back to the Stanley Cup final, as they should be favorites to get back and possibly win. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we have a trade in the division. We are going to give our first impressions of the trade that happened. We are going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. You can leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to your job to get more visibility at Indeed.com/locked on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Third and final segment here on this Tuesday, August 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. And so I wasn't planning on doing this segment here on the show, but with it being the off season and not a lot of activity going on, this sometimes when a trade happens, especially when it's in a division, it really affects the who the Panthers face. Obviously, coming into the season with the divisions, that's something to talk about, and I want to just give my first impressions on it. So, uh, we all know about the friendship between Aleksander Barkov and Patrik Laine. Obviously, they do their charity golf tournament every single year. So now that charity golf tournament just gets a little more interesting, as now these two players are in the same division, as Patrik Laine has been traded to the Montreal Canadiens. And it was Patrik Laine along with a second round pick to Montreal too. Obviously, there's been talk about Patrik Laine and his desire to not be in Columbus anymore. Did not have a great relationship with the previous management and the coaching staff, but even with a new GM in Don Waddell and head coach in Dean Evison, previously of the Minnesota Wild, and Waddell previously with the Carolina Hurricanes, Patrik Laine still wanted out. And Patrik Laine has been through a lot in his young career. Went to a Western Conference final, dealt with the Global Series against Barkov, which Paul Maurice was his coach, and then that trade with Columbus, and where John Tortorella benched him immediately after getting there. Different coaches, a different coach shortly after John Tortorella too, with Brad Larson. Obviously, there was up and downs about his relationship with young players. Mike Babcock didn't even coach a game too, where he was just looking through players' phones and just telling them to share stuff on a projector, and then he gets fired before he even coaches a game. And then you see Pascal Vincent come into the mix. So you're seeing multiple head coaches there for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So much turnover, and even with such a young roster for them and a whole bunch of draft capital, it's still really for Columbus. It feels like they were trying to rebuild, but also pay big money to two guys in Line A and Johnny Gaudreau to try to contend. So it was hard. It was going to be hard for them to go full tank for them and get the top lottery odds for them with guys like Gaudreau and Line. And with Laine going into the players assistant program after the fact him and his wife actually started an Instagram page on mental health called From Us to You. It's at From Us to You, except the O in you is the number 0 too, if you guys want to follow that too. But also Montreal has been through a lot of changes too, from making a miracle run to the Stanley Cup final to scorched earth rebuild, which is obviously was a miracle run for them. But changing the GM, changing the coach with Marc Bergevin especially after a questionable draft pick in Logan Mailloux. Dominic Ducharme didn't have a great relationship with guys like Cole Caulfield, so he ended up getting the boot too. You bring in a new guys like Jeff Gorton and Marty St. Louis into the mix. draft Yurov Slavkovsky, who had an injury-riddled first season there too. Obviously, you have your foundation there with guys like Nick Suzuki. I just mentioned Caulfield. Mike Matheson looks to be working out as the top defenseman there, and a whole bunch of other guys too who are still very, very young. Lane Hudson, who was just recently in the World Juniors for Team USA, Arbor Jack guy, aka Wi-Fi, who's a promising young guy there too. And Slavkovsky, him, Caulfield, and Suzuki all locked up for pretty low prices too, and getting a right-handed shot veteran forward in Patrik Laine to have Slavkovsky on the left wing on the top line and Patrik Laine on the second line too. The projections looks to be him and Alex Newhook and Kirby Dach on the other side, which Montreal's also taking another project in a guy who was a high draft pick in Chicago, which, funny enough, we mentioned Stan Bowman in the previous segment, and this was a pick that Stan Bowman didn't develop properly too. So Montreal's taking up guys who won in Alex Newhook, who was a Stanley Cup champion, and also Kirby Dach, who maybe didn't develop as fast as Chicago wanted him to. And obviously, there's still questions for their contracts, like Brendan Gallagher and Josh Anderson, as they're still trying to filter out of those eventually to get to possibly contending again. But there's no, at least from the outsider's perspective, from a Panther side of things, there's still no pressure on Montreal. It's a low risk, high reward type of trade for the Habs, which is great as they still once again have guys locked up there too. And Montreal is a pressure cooker too. Although I don't expect them to make the postseason, but if Patrik Laine, the expectation is for him to score 20 goals and he falls short of it, one thing I'm really wondering is how the fans are going to receive Patrik Laine, because I mean, Patrik Laine, when it comes to Finnish players in the history of the league, he's towards the tops of most 20 goal seasons by Finnish players. He's inside the top 10, believe it or not. So this is such a great trade, in my opinion, for Montreal. And I don't think you lose a lot, especially for the Columbus side of things. They get no salary. There's no salary retention. They paid an extra draft pick to get him off their hands too. That's how much the Columbus Blue Jackets wanted to get rid of him and his contract too. So that is something that is worth mentioning there as a low risk, high reward, as maybe it won't be immediate dividends for the Montreal Canadiens in this trade, but something that could eventually pay off later on as they're still trying to build too. And we mentioned Slavkovsky in the contract. A lot of players have skipped the bridge and gone with the long-term deals. I mean, Quentin Byfield in LA has also done that. Lundell in for the Panthers has also taken the 6-year deal. So also really helps GMs as the cap is, projected to go up and up and up, that it's less of a percentage. You're still able to build your team around. There's still questions about Sam Montembeault, if he is the number one guy, even though they did pay him too. Congratulations to Sam Montembeault once again on getting paid. And there's still for them the building blocks that they're putting together. And also that's just for this and the relationship between Barkov and Laine, the fact that they're seeing each other more now in the division, it's definitely going to be bringing in more exciting matchups for this, as the Panthers, they've dominated the Habs over the last few years. It's has been a series that the Panthers have definitely dominated over the years, but I don't think that Montreal is as much of a doormat as they have been. So they are going now. They don't look like, in my opinion, a top 5 lottery team on paper, but I have been in contact with the hosts of Locked On Canadiens to for a future crossover episode coming to discuss more about this trade and what they have to say about it too. So can't wait to discuss more about it. And just the division just got more interesting as there's still lots of pressure on the likes of a Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, and it just makes it so much fun. And it just leaves the question, is the Atlantic Division still the best division in the NHL? And with this trade, the division definitely got better. That's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the show, where Jacob Winans will be joining me on tomorrow's show. We will be discussing the top 10 regular season games of the 2023-2024 season. So make sure you come back for that episode, as we are going to discuss that and more. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.